Hey everyone, my name is Fenix and here's my beginner's guide to playing Dragoon. Most of my information comes from raiding on Dragoon for the past 2 raid tiers and from chatting with better Dragoons on the Balanced Discord. We're going to take a look at the basic rotation with all global cooldown skills first, and then we'll get into the off-global skills, so let's get right into it. Dragoon has a very static rotation that with a lot of practice won't be such a pain in the ass. The first one is Full Thrust, a 5-move combo that deals the highest potency. The combo starts with True Thrust, then Vorpal Thrust, Full Thrust, Fang and Claw, and ending with Wheeling Thrust. The second is the Chaos Thrust combo, also 5 moves that debuffs the boss with a piercing debuff and leaves a 30-second DOT, or dot, on the boss. To start this combo you begin with Impulse Drive, then Disembowel, Chaos Thrust, Wheeling Thrust, and finally Fang and Claw. You will need Blood of the Dragon active to fully execute each combo chain, but we'll talk more about it later on. When we add Heavy Thrust to the list, we get a near 30-second rotation that can be endlessly done for single target DPS. Start with Heavy Thrust, then move into the Chaos Thrust combo, finishing with a Full Thrust combo. Once done, you can simply rinse and repeat. There are 4 skills that have positionals to increase their damage. Heavy Thrust and Fang and Claw need to be executed from the enemy's flank or side, while Chaos Thrust and Wheeling Thrust need to be executed from the enemy's rear. When you have 2 targets, you will get more damage from rotating between both targets and doing the Chaos Thrust combo. This will allow your dot from Chaos Thrust to do damage to the enemy not currently being attacked. If there are more than 2 enemies, use the Sonic Thrust combo, which is Doom Spike into Sonic Thrust. This is a line AoE though, so make sure that you're in position to hit the most enemies as possible. The very last global cooldown skill to talk about is Piercing Talon. This is a ranged attack for Dragoons, and if you're trying to optimize damage, you should avoid it at all costs. It is vastly weaker than any other moves in terms of potency and TP cost. It does have a range of 15 yalms, but it will break any global cooldown skill combo chain. What's the point in playing Dragoon without bunny hopping all over the arena? Dragoons are known for their jump skills, and currently there are 4 in game: Jump, Spine Shatter Dive, Dragonfire Dive, and Elusive Jump. Let's see how they work and vary from each other. Jump moves you from your current position to damage the target and then returns you to your previous location. Spine Shatter Dive moves you to the target's location, damages it, and stuns it. Dragonfire Dive moves you to the target's location and does AoE damage upon landing. Elusive Jump, a backflip away from the target and drops your aggro by half. Jumps allow you to increase your DPS by executing them off the global cooldown. However, they can also be tricky to master. All 4 jumps give animation lock, meaning that while the animation for the skill is going, you cannot move or adjust your character. All it takes is 1 bad jump timing to cause a personal death or a party wipe during an endgame raid. Next, let's talk about the abilities that Dragoons get in their kit to buff themselves and their allies. This section will go a bit more into the exact details of each skill so that we can better understand them and know when to use them. First is Life Surge, attained at level 18. This skill buffs the next weapon skill, which is any of the skills on the global cooldown. This buff gives the weapon skill a critical hit and lets you recover 10% of the damage dealt as HP. Since we get a guaranteed critical hit, we need to be extremely picky about which weapon skill we use it on. And the best option to use it on is Full Thrust, the 3rd skill in the Full Thrust combo, as it is the highest potency weapon skill that Dragoons have. Next is Blood for Blood, obtained at level 30. This buff lasts for 20 seconds and increases damage dealt by 15%, but increases the damage taken by 10%. At level 52, we get Battle Litany. This is an AoE buff that increases yours and your party members' critical hit rate by 15%. This, along with the debuff from Disembowel, is a way to help your party members do more damage. Try to hit as many, if not all, of your party members with this 15 yalm radius AoE. The last buff that Dragoons have is Dragon Sight, obtained at level 66. This creates a tether between you and 1 ally. Your damage is buffed by 10% while your ally gets a 5% buff. While they keep the tether intact, if the tether disappears prior to the buff falling off, it simply means that your ally has moved out of range and they lose their 5% buff, but you don't lose your 10%. Your ally simply needs to move back into range to get their buff back. This buff does take a bit of practice to get used to, as you do need to target an ally to be able to use the skill. Now it's time to talk about the active passive that all Dragoons get at level 54, Blood of the Dragon. This is effectively a mini game that all Dragoons play while in a fight. While activating this skill, we get a timer of 20 seconds, and during that time, Jump and Spine Shatter Dive are buffed, and gain access to the final moves of each chain, Fang, Claw, and Wheeling Thrust. Add a new move called Gear Skogul. The minigame is to never let Blood of the Dragon fall off during a fight, unless the fight dictates it. Fang and Claw and Wheelie and Thrust both add 10 seconds to the timer of Blood of the Dragon. Both skills are at the end of each combo, so as long as we follow the Dragoon rotation, we will not drop this buff, unless again the fight dictates it. Blood of the Dragon caps out at 30 seconds, so you cannot store more time. Gear Skogul is a line AoE that can be used every 30 seconds while under Blood of the Dragon. It has a reach of 15 yalms, so it can hit some targets that are further out. Mirage Dive is accessible outside of Blood of the Dragon, but it should only be used while under it. You can use Mirage Dive after Jump or Spine Shatter Dive. You do get 15 seconds to cast it, so you no need to do it right away. Each Mirage Dive gives a Dragon Eye stack, which caps at 3. At 3 stacks, executing a Gear Skogul will allow Dragoons to enter a burst phase called Life of the Dragon. Life of the Dragon takes the current time on Blood of the Dragon and copies it. The blue aura from Blood of the Dragon changes to crimson while Life of the Dragon is active. Gear Skogul changes to Nastron during this time, and the cooldown lowers from 30 seconds to 10. The goal while in Life of the Dragon is to get 3 Nastrons off, so it is recommended to go into the burst phase with 25 or more seconds on Blood of the Dragon's timer, with the bare minimum being 22 seconds. Once Life of the Dragon ends, Blood of the Dragon will reactivate at the same time it was at prior to entering Life of the Dragon. Comboing buffs with Nastron during Life of the Dragon is a great way to increase personal DPS while doing raids and clearing pesky mobs of enemies while in dungeons or solo content. This is my beginner's guide to playing Dragoon at level 70. I hope this will be a basis for those wanting to learn more about Dragoon and not be so intimidated by the job. Thanks for watching and see you next time.